Hello, and welcome back to my pocket of the interweb. I am San, the center of this universe, and I will be your guide for the interim. The idea for this transmission came to me when I came across a meme with a billboard that said, "Your oldest fears are the worst ones." Obviously, this made me think. First of all, what are my oldest fears? Second, worse in what way? Does worse mean most difficult to overcome? Could my oldest fears still be affecting me to this day in ways that I was unconscious of because I had not been led to consider this fact? And that led me to spend some time thinking about what my 5 oldest fears might be. But before we delve into my deepest and darkest, be sure to tap that subscribe button to enter my orbit. Let us begin. What I found to be my oldest fear, and number 1, was being torn away from those I love, possibly forever. The reason for this is that my parents basically stopped getting along. As soon as I was born, there was an immediate custody battle, and this caused my earliest memories to be very early. Like, my first memory is in the 1-year range. Because of this, I was, constantly bouncing back and forth from my dad to my mom, and when I was with my mom, I was at my grandma's house. At a certain point, around my 2nd birthday, my father's custody was taken away, but he didn't want to give me back, so he stole me away. We lived our lives on the road. He bought a motorhome that he called Big Boy. Well, he still has it, and its name is Big Boy. We would live on the beach or in Chuck E. Cheese parking lots because I loved Chuck E. Cheese. Oh, and the beach because my father liked to surf back in the day. I was none the wiser. Because he was my father, I thought I was supposed to be there, But one day, the cops came. There were 2 cops, a black one and a bald white one, both men. They put my dad in the back seat, and in the front I sat on the lap of the bald one, who had brought a bunny stuffed animal and gave it to me for me to hold, which I guess was supposed to be comforting, but my father was right here with his fingers on the little caginess at the back of the cop car, crying and just telling me that everything was going to be okay. When we got to the station, I was put in an office, just like a big white room, and given some milk duds to eat while I waited for hours for them to figure out what they were going to do with me. So that was when I was put in the system. I was in my first foster home at about 2.5 years old. I left it at about 3. From 3 to 6 was my first group home experience, and it continued on from there, group homes and foster homes, until I was 19 years old. So there was a lot of moving and a lot of being forcibly taken from place to place, against my knowledge often before it happened, and a lot of waiting in offices for them to figure out where they were going to put me now. It's a very long story, but because of this, there were a lot of relationships I got to form and then didn't even get to comfortably sever, like didn't even get to say goodbye. That is where my first fear of getting torn away from those I love, possibly forever, came from. My second oldest fear is overwhelmingly loud noises. Ever since I was super tiny, like, again, around a year old, you can feel it in your chest and your whole body is being assaulted. This has always been just so overwhelming and makes my heart beat really fast. It's definitely a fight or flight. Like, I used to be afraid of fireworks. I used to be afraid of the vacuum cleaner, of loud flushing public toilets. I literally couldn't be alone in a bathroom when I was very small, like a public bathroom, because the flush was so loud and so forceful. I would need to know I wasn't alone. I would make people who were supposed to watch me stand in front of my stall so I could see their feet, and that helped a little bit, but it's still a lot. Definitely always been sensitive to sound waves. So yeah, that's my second oldest fear. My third oldest fear would have to be judgment. Other people's judgment, right? I was pretty confident and carefree as a child. My first group home was 3 to 6, and then I aged out of that group home. I was too old for that group home, so I had to go to the next level up, which was a group home for 6 to 12-year-old kids. In this group home with the slightly older kids, I got to experience little things, little judgments, like, who sings this song? Well, let's keep it that way, right? But it didn't really bother me that much. I brushed it off because I was like, I know I'm a good singer. Again, confident. Until I was 11 and was put into a group home for 16 to 18-year-old girls because they literally couldn't find anywhere else to put me. Again, at 11. My first night there, I was childishly optimistic. Between the living room and the den was an atrium, so glass walls separated the living room from the further in den area. Just before the atrium starts the hallway to go to the bathroom and the bedrooms. So living room, atrium, hallway, bathroom. I went to the bathroom, and on my way into the bathroom, because it was nighttime when I arrived, the atrium was black like a mirror because, you know, glass, nature space to the outside world at night is dark. On my way to the bathroom, I sort of checked myself out in the mirror, like to make sure I was cute, smiled at myself, and then went into the bathroom, satisfied that I looked alright, that I had made a decent impression, because on the way to the bathroom was when I was introduced to all the girls. In the bathroom, the girls started talking shit about me while the staff were doing my intake paperwork or whatever they were doing, exchanging stuff with my social worker. And when I came out of the bathroom, I heard it. They were making fun of the way I smiled at myself in the mirror. I was 11 and they were so much older than me, and it hit me hard. That was when I think people's judgments really started to become a thing, because these girls were so much more judgmental than the children I had grown up with up until this point. I learned a lot, but it also started to affect things. The harmony of my experience could be disrupted by other people's judgment of me. My fourth oldest fear is the fear of death. I would just wake up in the middle of the night around 6, filled with existential dread. Obviously, if you've ever experienced existential dread, that is to say, if you've ever been a person, you know it's a heavy, dark, overwhelming feeling. And so little 6-year-old me would wander out into the living room to the nearest staff member and ask if I could have a hug, and maybe if they could pray with me, because I was raised Christian. They usually would, and it would help me feel better, and then I could go back to bed. One specific time I did not receive this response from the night staff is, again, another story. Oh my gosh. But usually they took pity on me. Since then, I've had many experiences that have evolved my perspective on this situation, the necessity, the balance, and also what I believe about the soul now that I am no longer Christian. Just not a fan of organized religion to begin with, but also I've studied a lot more, and yeah, anyway, that's a whole other video. And my fifth oldest fear definitely would have to be roller coasters. Have not been a fan of them for quite some time. They just kept getting bigger and bigger once I was tall enough to ride, and I realized that I'm just not really a fan of plummeting face first toward the ground. I don't have a fear of heights, but I'm not a fan of the roller coaster. Alright, lovely humans, this has been my 5 oldest fears. Do you remember what your oldest fears might be? Do you relate to any of mine? Leave a comment down below. I would love to share in your experience, bond, consider the implications, etc. As always, I am beyond grateful for your energy and attention. Tap like if you feel me, and you'll be seeing me next time.